following podcast is for informational purposes only. The contents of this podcast do not constitute tax, legal, or investment advice. Take responsibility for your own decisions, consult with the proper professionals, and do your own research.
As I said earlier, I think the graph is a democratic way of handling data. And it's going to be a vibrant platform of information that's useful, accurate, and reliable. And I believe in that so much.
GRTIQ Podcast.
We're like astronauts floating in the space of time. Lost between the past and future.
Welcome to the GRTIQ podcast. Today I'm speaking with Carl Hagerling, co-founder and design lead at Edge & Node. You may not know Carl, or perhaps you haven't heard his name before, but you've definitely admired his work. Carl is the designer who created the Graph's logo and brand. My conversation with Carl covers many interesting topics, including how he met the founders of the Graph in the early days before they started the Graph, his impressive professional credentials, providing world-class design work for some of the world's largest brands, and something I know you will enjoy hearing and learning more about, how Carl approached and created the Graph's logo and brand. As always, I started the conversation by asking Carl about his background.
So I studied too long, I would say, if I was going to summarize it shortly. But I have two educations, one within media design and one within industrial design. So first I have a bachelor in media design, and I was 18 starting that. At the time it was I had the first iMac generation, 1998, and I used Illustrator 8. And what was really good with that school was I had internships, so I had the opportunity to go out to real working environments and talk to real users. And that's what I learned the most from doing. And then it was also the big crash there, the IT boom. It collapsed in a little way. And I always felt like web design or web development was not a real thing. So at the time, I didn't consider web development to be a real profession. So I wanted to go into from software that didn't feel like it was just my hobby to create websites and other things into a real job doing hardware design. So then I applied for an industrial design program in Lund, Sweden. And they accepted me, and it was a 5-year education. And it felt great to do real products also. I am still passionate about physical objects. But at that school, I think I developed my creative side. I met so many other talented creatives. And we lived and worked or studied really close to each other. So it was a place where you can collaborate and just grow as a person. And that's where I evolved my form language. Because I just produced designs. And the more you produce, the more you get to know yourself and what you like and why you don't like things. And you have your friends also providing feedback, harsh and honest. And I still hang out with some of the friends from that time. I guess also during that time, I developed a reliable design process. Because design is an art in a way. And sometimes it's hard to predict when you will create the masterpiece. When do you have that source of inspiration that just kicks in? But I somehow managed to rely on that. I will always have find some source of inspiration. I will always hit the deadline somehow. And that is really good, especially when you're working in real environments and not in school. Then it's always hitting deadline. I would say also for a while there, maybe before studying, I thought I'm going to run out of ideas. So maybe I hold my ideas close to myself. But as time passed, I realized, no, I will not run out of ideas. And ideas are better shared because they grow. And so I'm much more open nowadays and collaborative. And it's much more fun, the design process, if you're sharing instead of like introverted.
So with all that said then, Carl, why is it that you decided to pursue a career in design?
Okay, so I studied like 7 years of design in total. So that's a long time. But I think that what I learned most from is actually my parents. I had an amazing family growing up. I have the luxury because my father, he had his own business. So that always felt like this kind of go your own path, create something you believe in. I had that from growing up. And I know like I had the luxury, and I know a lot of people don't have this, but I know like if something doesn't work out in my life, I know I have my family as a safety net. And that makes me risk a little bit in life. And I know they will lift me up if I fall. I hope that's something I can give to my kids also, that they have some safety net, but so they can be adventurous and take risks and follow their dreams. And what's from my earliest, like my father had his own company running, he had his business running from home. So I always had like computers around. And in the beginning, maybe it was mostly computer games. But then after a while, like we started to design our own computer games, my brother and myself. But then maybe we did like the Duke Nukem, they had a map editor. And then maybe I started to create my own maps and made my own textures and my own weapons. And then I wanted to do t-shirts with prints with the designs. And then I started using Illustrator to do that. And then I had to have a web page to showcase my designs. And then I had to learn like web design. And so one thing led to another, but it's all started with, I think, my parents setting the foundation for creation and giving us computers at the early age.
Well, you're joining me from Sweden, and I always take the opportunity when I interview guests of the podcast to find out what their home country's attitude is towards crypto. So what are the people of Sweden's attitudes towards crypto right now?
So I must say first, Sweden is amazing. I love this country, and I will probably stay here until I die. But they don't like crypto. I don't know why they're so afraid of it, but I cannot have it like a Swedish bank. All banks blocked crypto trading. So I cannot, for a while I had no salary because I couldn't bring it to Sweden. So I don't know, I had to live on my wife's salary. Yeah, it was tough because I couldn't get my salary. And it's so frustrating. And whatever I do, I feel like I'm a criminal right now, working for a crypto project. But it's nothing illegal about it. And I understand that they are like afraid of like people trading weapons and money being black or not clean. But it's affecting a lot of other people also doing good things, trying to make great products. So I hope things will be better here moving on.
Carl, what can you tell us about then some of the work you did professionally in your design career?
So in the town where I studied industrial design, it's Lund. And that's where Sony Mobile or Ericsson had their headquarters. And this was during the time when like the mobile industry, like it was exploding. And I think like Sony Mobile was the second biggest producer of mobile phones after Nokia. So it was a major place for industrial design of phones, and they went all creative there. So I joined Sony Mobile, and it was such an amazing time to be there. It was the same time as they launched the iPhone. And it was interesting to just be there, whether people at Sony Mobile, they were nervous, but still like they didn't really, they tried to push away the threat and they didn't want to really see it. And it was like a too expensive phone and they didn't see it. But I felt it, that this is going to change the world. Then I joined a hardware design agency called Hagerling Design. And it was the former chief designer at Saab Automobile who led that, Einar Hareide. And there I had the opportunity to design like big scale projects. And I always imagined myself to design smaller pieces of objects, but here I was like designing train interiors, truck fronts, wheels, and transportation design. And it was really challenging because there's a lot of people that's really passionate about transportation design, and I wasn't one of them. But maybe that was good because I came with like another point of view. So it's challenging, and I learned a lot, and I met great people. And if you collaborate with great people, you grow yourself as well. After working at Horror Design, I formed my own agency called Hagerling Forum, based off my last name, Hagerling. And then I did that for some years. I just went all creative. It felt like I had been like not in a bubble, but I just want to try all creative fields out. And other fields as well. I just did everything I wanted. Like I had like 50 clients at the same time, and I created a furniture brand where I started to manufacture and sell like shelves. I did a lot of like furniture concepts. I was awarded the Breakthrough of the Year by the Swedish magazine. I got like a big office space, so I started to rent out office spaces to other creatives. So we had this environment where we just did a lot of different things. I had clients as big clients, and one big client was IKEA, and I did a lot of furnitures for them, and a lot of objects and garden tools, and a lot of them are still sold. Everything worked out very well there for a while. I had everything. I had my house, I had my car, my lovely wife, and kids and work. But I guess like I would like to challenge myself even more. So my wife and I, we started talking about what can we do next? And we talked about moving abroad because she does some research within breast cancer. And thanks to her, we had the opportunity to move to San Francisco. And I got my visa through her. So thank you, amazing wife, Katharina. And my intent moving there was to work for Google. But things change in life. And in the same building we moved to, there was another Swedish guy. And he recommended me to apply for this job at MuleSoft. I never heard about the MuleSoft at the time, but I thought, okay, I give it a shot. And when I worked there, it was an atmosphere I haven't never been in before. And it was creative. It was warm. And I really enjoyed my time there, and I met great people. And some of the people there was actually like Janiv. And I remember the first day I met him, I saw something in him. And like, I think the same evening we went to a bar, and I said, we're going to do great things together. And we're going to build. And then it was more about React systems and build components in React to create a nice platform for MuleSoft. And we did that. But I didn't expect that we would do even more greatness together. And at that time at MuleSoft, that's when I found my love in designing complex data systems or platforms. And then Tesla reached out to me and asked if I would like to join their team. And it was so hard to say no to that because it was a more compelling product, I thought, at the time, because I was going to be the responsible for UX on their energy side. And growing up, our family was one of the first families in Sweden who were having solar panels on the roof. So my father is really into like green energy. And here I had the opportunity to work at Tesla in the forefront on their energy side, designing the app and the user experience. So it was too hard to say no to that. And at Tesla, it was so great people, smart engineers. But I never felt creatively that I fitted. It was not that atmosphere with the other creatives. I was more like doing it by myself. I had the opportunity to work with a great intern, but I wanted more creative challenges. And then Facebook reached out to me and they said, we're starting up this lab, like the Moonshot Factory. where I'm going to be responsible for the industrial design and the UX design, like that crossover. And I'm going to work with some of the best creatives, former IDEO employees. And it felt like, okay, I'm here in San Francisco with the most creative minds, and I have the opportunity to work in the forefront with the other creative minds and learn so much. So it was, and so going from Tesla, where I worked more in isolation, to work at Facebook, where I can grow as a creative much more. It was hard to say no to that. And it's fun, but now looking back in the mirror, like now I work in an industry where Facebook is seen as one of the nightmares with the centralized data, and they control your data. And I guess I've been naive in a way. At the time, I prioritized exploring my creativity more and grow as a creative. But I still think like what Facebook done, they have like received a lot of bad reputation, and they're doing great stuff also. And that's a lot of times that's not seen by the industry or people law after the Cambridge Analytica scandal. And at the time I worked for Facebook, Janiv, Janice, and Brandon, they kicked off the graph, and we talked about me joining them. So the first thing I did, I moved back to Sweden, left San Francisco, and back in Sweden, I joined the graph.
The GRTIQ podcast is made possible by a generous grant from the Graph Foundation. The Graph Grants program provides support for protocol infrastructure, tooling, dApps, subgraphs, and community building efforts. Learn more at thegraph.foundation. That's thegraph.foundation.
Hi, this is GRTIQ. In past episodes of the podcast, we've learned that one way delegators help to secure the network at the graph is by staking GRT with indexers. The network is designed to look at how delegators stake their GRT to identify trustworthy and reliable indexers. In a very similar way, podcast directories look to the reviews and ratings of listeners like you as a way to gauge the trustworthiness and reliability of podcasts. If every listener of this episode took 5 minutes to leave a review and rate the podcast, that directory would rank the GRT IQ podcast higher in search results, making it easier for community members and those seeking more information about the graph to find it. Thanks for supporting this project.
Thank you for your support.
Roger that.
What is a guy with a lot of background, high-level background at Facebook, Tesla, working on projects for IKEA? What does a guy like you think about crypto when you first encounter it?
So the first time I encountered crypto, it was not like I was like a Bitcoin owner. It was like when Janiv pitched the idea behind the graph. And he expressed like to index blockchain data. And I didn't even think that it would be a problem back then. But he pulled me into it. He pitched it really well. He's really visionary. He's a great mind and person. And what I think about crypto, so maybe it's similar to like IKEA. Their slogan is democratic design or something like that. And like crypto and decentralized protocols, it's democratic. It gives the users ownership. They own the data, and anyone can participate as long as you have internet. It's more reliable and it's cheaper. And yeah, I'm not a technical expert, so I don't know the technology behind, but I believe in it so much because it's democratic.
So what can you tell us about the energy of the founders early on before the graph even came along? I mean, what can you tell us about those early days and, I guess, entrepreneurial vision?
So we have great minds. Like if I just go to Janiv, he's a visionary. He has his finger on the pulse, like 30 years from now. He feels what's going on. And Brandon, that is so thoughtful and does the research. And he's one of the smartest person I ever met. and a great human being. And Janis, who's the best engineer I worked with, backend, and a great person, and also so humble in a way. And I think the mixture is creating this. They are very humble and smart and expecting the best from everyone. And I think they're pulling out the best capacity of everyone. At least that's what I feel. And I think that's rare in the industry to be able to work for, like, it's a mature company. The people working for it, it's mature. They have a lot of experience, but they're still humble and open and friendly. And that's really nice to be in that culture.
Were you nervous to make the move from traditional business with, again, a lot of credentials doing really great design work into crypto, which is really a new sector, and a startup with some guys that you met here in San Francisco?
I was never afraid because I trusted like Genevieve, Brandon, and Janice so much. So I wouldn't say I was afraid at all. The only thing is like when you have to explain to the people around you what you're working with, and they it's just question marks, and maybe they would expect you to do like a more safe career move.
So, Carl, how would you describe your role at the Graph and Edge Node, what you do on a day-to-day basis there?
So it's in a way I've been in a transition because I've been in IC for a long time, just producing content, and as the team grows, I have a great team helping me out. So I'm more of a manager now. So I'm going from IC to semi-manager. And so my day-to-day life is more like I start the morning with a great coffee, need that coffee. Then after the coffee, I check Slack, because the great thing about different time zones is like we work 24 hours a day, it feels like. But so when I wake up, I have a lot of questions in Slack or in my mail or in Figma, as we use as a design tool. I check all comments, try to provide feedback. That takes like more or less half my day, just providing feedback to different work streams and just generating ideas or proposals. So maybe what if we do this way? What if we do this? So I try to be as creative and open as possible. And then the next part is creating new features, new exciting projects, because it's so much things going on at the Graph that I would like to tell you about that's coming out. But I guess like we could talk about that in maybe 1 year. But that's my day-to-day life.
So I want to talk about the brand of the Graph. You join early. Obviously, Brandon, Yaniv, Giannis, they're all coming up with what I would understand is the product and the technology, but they need a guy like you to come along with, I presume, input on the UX, but also building the brand. So can you take us through your thought process? What was going through your mind? You've already mentioned you kind of like the idea of being a designer for complex systems. And so this is very complex in a lot of ways, the Graph is. So talk to us about that challenge and what your original vision as you were thinking through the Graph for its brand.
So when joining the Graph, I had the luxury because we had nothing. We had no logo, we had no brand, it was just a name, the Graph. And that is a luxury to be able to shape everything. It's like a white canvas. But that could also be terrifying and limiting. It's like, do whatever you want. Where do you start? You have to like anchor yourself somewhere. So that's the first thing I did, anchor myself. And then together with the other, like it was just Janiv and Brandon and Janice at the time, and also Rodrigo was a great mind. Then I formed some keywords. What is it all about? And it could be like solid. It could be adventurous, pioneers, soft words like that. But one of the words was like infrastructure. And I pivoted towards infrastructure. And I saw it like, it felt like the Graph has always been around, even if it was new, because it felt so, not monolithic, but solid. And It feels like almost like the Matrix. Like everything around us is the Matrix and you're in it. And I saw the graph similar. So I went back in time and looked like on old civilizations. And because the infrastructure kind of connects them and defines them, like roads, water systems. And that drove me towards like the Aztec civilization. And it was something about that, how things looked that just gravitating towards me. It was so much inspiration there. So I created this kind of pattern inspired by the hieroglyphic carvings, architecture, and art that felt like, I don't know, there's a pattern of communication of small digits floating into a system. And that was kind of the starting point. They also have a god in the Aztec civilization, like for symmetry. I don't remember the name for him, but the god of duality. And that two things, it also everything has two sides. And that's also, I really like that visually. But then it was not just about the infrastructure and the duality. It was also about that they had a really strong sense for astronomy and the space and the calendar. So they looked down in the infrastructure, but they also looked up in space, out in the stars. And that kind of dynamic, like space and old. So space is like the future, forward. And then you have the infrastructure. That's kind of the past. So the old meets the new. So it feels like it's always been around, but it's facing the future. So if you look at the colors, come the purple, blue that comes from space, and you have the iconography that comes more from the Aztec hieroglyphics. And if you look at the logo, it's actually like a planet with a spaceship and a moon orbiting around. So that is the story with the brand of the graph, more or less.
So you said originally when you were coming up with the idea for the brand and had the white canvas, you had to anchor yourself. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by you needed to anchor yourself?
Yeah, because I had to anchor myself. Otherwise, I could create whatever. The color spectrum, it could be everything from red to green. But I had to find a story to connect with that felt like honest to the value of the company. And that's why I had to anchor myself.
Carl, what are some of the challenges then? In addition to a blank canvas, which you said is a great opportunity, but also a little bit of a challenge for a designer, what is the additional challenge of trying to create a brand and imagery and messaging for something that is quite complex like the graph?
So what I'm facing right now, the hard for me is consistency. And brand is all about consistency. It's like graph is a person. And a person, okay, it could change the personality, but it doesn't make the change of the personality from one week to another. Maybe it takes some years. And you can slowly change. And when it was just me, I produced all content because we were much smaller like a year ago. But now we're bigger and we collaborate with more people. The community is big. So the brand scales up. And that means that I have to define the brand better. And this is something we need because we've been working a lot hard to create a product that's usable. And it demands a lot. So what's challenging for me now is to define the brand better. And you can do this in a brand book with some style guides. So you can easily explain to other people, this is the rules for our personality, our brand. So that is a challenge right now for me.
You say that a brand is like a person. It has a personality. Let's play with that idea just for a second here. If the graph brand became personified and this individual walked into the room, how would you describe or how would you let us know what this person is like?
So that is a great question. And I think we should talk more about it internally. But what I imagine is the graph is a smart person that's thoughtful but not cocky in any way. Like I mentioned, I basically like a little bit of the founders, humble and joyful, pioneers. Like an humble pioneer, maybe casual, but also a little bit well dressed up. It's also how you talk as a person. So maybe it's like a person with that can speak for himself or herself really well, and a nice person.
Is that person optimistic?
Yes, very. And brave. And also high in integrity and stick to his or her beliefs.
Hi, this is Carl Hagerling. I'm co-founder and design lead at Edge Node, and I'm a contributor at The Graph. If my conversation with the GRTIQ podcast has been helpful to you, then please consider supporting future episodes by becoming a subscriber. Visit grtiq.com/podcast for more information. That's grtiq.com/podcast.
Podcast.
Thank you for listening.
Carl, I'd be curious to know if you ever had any hesitation about using the space theme for brand development or creation of the graph, when a lot of people on Twitter, or certainly in the crypto space at large, talk about mooning when it comes to price discussion and things like that. Were you nervous about any correlation there?
No, I never thought about it. And maybe it's because I'm Swedish. I never heard the expression. But my big concern is like the space could be a little bit cliche, like you surfing the web, this old cliche. And here we are like with sometimes using an astronaut on a snowboard in space or something, or wakeboard in space. And I would rather go back a little bit more to Earth, that we're looking up. So we feel more grounded than being up in space. But I like the contrast of being on the grounded and looking up in space.
Carl, what you leveraged Aztec civilization to create the brand, and I love what you said about the logo and this tie between infrastructure and space, staying grounded but looking out to potential and opportunity. What do you think a project like the Graph, a brand like the Graph, says about civilization presently, where we're going, what we're working on, what our opportunities for the future are?
That's a great question, because, and I think we're creating the new civilization. Web3, crypto, blockchain is a new civilization that's more democratic, as I mentioned. And it's more fair. We don't see color. We don't see race. We see what you can provide to the space, to the protocol or the project. We're all about collaboration and openness and transparency. And that's value pillars that I would like to stand on and build the next civilizations.
As a designer, Carl, do you have any consternation? Does it make you nervous or upset that everything at the Graph is open source, and so your logo and all the work and effort you put into that, it shows up everywhere, right? On people's Twitter feeds, on people's website? Or was that just part of understanding this new environment and that this would kind of come along with it? How have you thought through that?
That's really interesting. Yeah, because people do build on top of what I did. That's what I started in a way. And in the beginning, we had no, for example, no character that's belonged to our brand. But then I put the astronaut in one on the jobs page. And it was just, the community just took that and brought it to themselves and then just ran with it. So it was like astronauts everywhere. Like if you looked at this Discord and on Twitter, everything was rockets and astronauts in space. And I guess I just went with it and continued the space theme and pushed for that even harder. But something maybe that disappeared was the Aztec foundation that I set. And now it's more about the space. And I guess things like that happen when you have a strong community, and in the crypto, when you build on top of each other. And maybe this ties back to what I said earlier, collaboration is amazing and it's powerful and it brings us further. It's like keeping your ideas by yourself or sharing them.
So I want to ask you a follow-up question about the Graph community. So as somebody who met the founders and you kind of being early on in the whole project, creating the brand out of nothing, what's it been like for you seeing this community build up and get so engaged in the project?
Yeah, so I've been in many, like, I worked at different companies, but I've never been in a company like EdgeNode or The Graph, because it's been such a momentum since day one and such an interest in our product. And the community members it's a vibrant community and it's like an engine. It's encouraging you. You're excited. You're joining. You're like, you're with them. And that keeps me up every morning. That makes me just work harder and do more great things and do better things for them because they deserve it. And I push myself to do better designs.
You and I met each other a little while ago. We had to go through some planning and scheduling to get this recording. A lot of things have happened since then. Curation launched, other big announcements with core dev teams. As you look back on all the creative things you've done at the Graph, from present to when you started, what are some of the things you're most proud of as a designer, as someone behind the build?
So the things I'm always most proud of, they've never been built or they haven't been launched. It's always the next thing you're most proud of. At least that's how I work. And I can't mention, but we have great things coming out and planned. But then maybe what I'm most proud of, maybe it's just be able to work with such great people because they challenge me every day. And it's such a hard space to be in. It's so complex. So it's always interesting. And I would also say that I'm really proud of my team. And all the new employees at the Graph. And I really hope that we can keep the culture that we have. And that we have so great talents within the team. And together I think we set up to create greatness.
Carl, if you zoom out and you look at all of crypto, so not just the Graph, but all of these different companies that fit within this space, what's your sensibilities regarding the design that's going into it? I mean, I'm nowhere near the designer you are, but I love graphic design. I'm very interested in brand design and a lot of the things that you get to work on every day. And it seems to me that the crypto space is very unique in this regard and the different things people are coming up with. Are you seeing the same thing?
Yes, I am. So what I think is interesting is like it's a new space. It is like visionaries starting those projects. And it's so many interesting projects out there. And I think they're also like visionary when it comes to design and they're pushing it. And some projects are going really well, like financially. So they have resources to hire really great designers. So I think that's the combination there of being brave and having the ability to hire great creatives, push the space really well. Something I think we can work more on is maybe UX patterns. I think we, as a creative in the industry, we can do a better job with the UX patterns. Because I know, like for new users, it's a friction point. They have to get a wallet, they have to get some tokens or ETH, and before be able to participate. So it's a friction point there. So like, could we unify that and all the transaction and create so it feels more safe, reliable, so you don't feel afraid performing a transaction? Yes. I would like to work on that, like unifying the UX patterns for Web3 transactions.
Carl, I really appreciate the opportunity to have met with you. And I was so anxious to meet you. I admire all your work. I really wanted to meet the mind and the team behind the Graph brand and its personality. And so it was a real thrill for me when you agreed to do this. I think it would be very interesting to ask the guy that helped launch the brand and the brand personality what his long-term vision for the Graph is.
As I said earlier, I think the Graph is a democratic way of handling data. And I think everybody should be able to be part of that movement. I want to make the graph a better experience for new users, to make it easier for them to delegate, to curate, because that's something everyone can do. And I think it's so much opportunity there. And also, like, when we have all the data collected, more and more data at the graph, you can do crossovers between subgraphs, pull data from other subgraphs, combine them, create your own subgraph. More and more people can create their own subgraphs. And it's going to be a vibrant platform of information that's useful, accurate, and reliable. And I believe in that so much.
This has been a production of the GRT IQ podcast. For more information, including detailed show notes, visit grtiq.com/podcast. That's grtiq.com/podcast.
Please consider contributing to this project and helping build the community by subscribing and leaving a review.
GRT IQ
Podcast. Roger that.